Hello, everyone. Welcome back from your coffee breaks. I'm Laura van Broekhoven, and I'm chairing the next panel. We are in the unfortunate position that COVID is still amongst us, and that Ananda and Anjali won't be able to be with us, but they have gone through the extraordinary measures of actually recording their presentation. So we will be able to see their presentation, which was really an exceptionally important one, and I'm really pleased that they've been able to do that. We'll be talking about inclusion, and Setare Noorani is with us, and for the panel discussion, actually, the PI of the Transforming Collections, Susan Pui-San-Lok, is going to join us very, very last minute, so we're very, very pleased that you were able to say yes to this, and very grateful also that you'll be able to take some of the questions that you might have after the panel. I think that to weave inclusivity into bringing together the UK's collections seems almost obvious and necessary, extremely necessary on the one hand, and at the same time, because all of our collections, as was mentioned earlier in the introductory session also, are from all around the world. They bring in these different worlds that were conceived differently and in other places. And what we would hope is that actually in the way that we're categorizing that world, that will also be visible, that we are actually including many different worldviews, many different epistemologies and ontologies. But as we'll see from our panelists' papers today, it's not that easy to do this. Because unless we fundamentally reconfigure our ways of working to allow for lived experience to be so much more upfront and important in the ways that we described, and to allow for many, many different vantage points, plurality, and to move away from the sort of epistemes and categorizations that are extremely colonial, rooted in colonialism, it will be really difficult to actually feel that those that can be included, those stories, those narratives, those worlds, those epistemologies and ontologies that can be included, actually we make space for that inclusion. And I think that's what we're really trying to unpick. How do we make that space, and how do we then connect all those different storylines with each other? So we're very grateful for the honesty, the care, the congruence with which our presenters have been able to formulate their thoughts. They might also feel quite vulnerable doing so please bear with us, because it's not easy to bring the more sort of harsh, difficult stories. And I think the film introduced really beautifully how there are many uncomfortable facts that lie in our collections. There's the contested heritage. There's also those sidelined narratives. There's marginalized and excluded voices that were talked about earlier. There's the extractivism that sits within AI, and how do we sort of make sure that we don't continue that exploitation of labor and exploitation of the earth while we are working towards making accessible those collections. Because we'll talk a little bit in the panel also about how there is a clamoring and a need and a keenness for communities across the globe to access the collections that are in the UK's heritage and that lie in our heritage. Now we're going to have 3 speakers. You can read their bios in the little booklet. But just to say, we're going to start with Setare Noorani, who is an architect, researcher, and curator at the Nieuwe Instituut in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And she is an award-winning researcher. She was awarded the Museum Talent Prize in 2021 by the Mondriaan Fund. She's had many, many projects that she will actually talk about, so I'm not going to mention all of them. But she does, her work focuses on the qualitative, on paradigm-shifting notions of decoloniality, on feminisms, on queer ecologies, on non-institutional representation. So I'm sure she will be challenging us to sort of think more deeply, more widely, more broadly. And I'm really happy that you'll be speaking. I'm just going to also talk a little bit about Ananda Rutherford, whose research and professional practice focus on the history and role of museum documentation and the digitization of museum collections. Increasingly, her work is focusing on structural racism in museum cataloging and object descriptions. And her research, he was a research associate on the TANK project, on the foundation project of provisional semantics. And then she's currently based at the University of the Arts in London as a research fellow. And then there's Dr. Anjali Dalal Clayton. She's an art historian, and they're presenting together, Anjali and Ananda, online, or a recorded presentation. And she's a research fellow also at the University of the Arts Decolonizing Arts Institute. Her specialisms are the art and exhibition histories of the African and Asian diasporas in Britain, as well as collecting, interpretation, and display practices in public museums and galleries. And we're very, very pleased to have this panel, even though some of it is going to be a bit more remote than we would have hoped. And they're very sorry not to be able to be here, but that's with sort of bereavement and health conditions. They happen and they make us having to prioritize in life. So Tari, I'm going to invite you to come up.